Hey there, I want to thank you.
Operation Domination is underway. The ultimate game plan to dominate your NFL experience. With your hosts, Dan Mader.
But what's more impressive to me about the
Chase Thornton.
Yeah, I mean, I got it.
Chris Dowhouse.
Get him, Chase.
And Adam
No,
LaRue.
not necessarily, but it's again the same as
Don't hope to win. Be great and dominate.
Well, it's Wednesday night, so it must be time for Operation Domination with the boys. That's right. I'm your host, Dan Mader, joined here with the full crew today. We got Chase Thornton in the house with Adam LaRue and Chris Dowhower. Thanks for checking us out live on our YouTube channel. Make sure you go to @FFAdvice, subscribe, hit the bell notification, get notified when we have new content available to you. There's new content literally every single day, and download us on your favorite podcast app so you can listen to the show while you're on the go. We got a big one in store for you today. We're going to be talking about some dynasty tips, especially at startup time. We talked about best ball already earlier this month, and pretty soon, we'll get to it later in the show, but pretty soon we'll get into that team profile series. It's going to take us through the first half of the summer, essentially. So I can't wait for that. We'll have great guests coming up over the next 8 weeks, but that is down the line. Adam, what are we talking about today, man? What are you looking into?
Yeah, we're about to talk about some Dynasty, which, as you guys know, is my favorite section of the fantasy football landscape. And look, I think it's the perfect time to talk about it. You know, we did our best ball episode a couple weeks ago. We did a rookie draft episode, I believe, the week before that. And those are like the two drafts that are happening right now, you know? So, hey, we've gotten you a rookie mock draft on Dynasty. Go check out that episode. We've gotten you a best ball draft. Go check out that. Now we're coming back around to Dynasty, and we're going to talk about the rookies too, but we're going to get you, hey, like, did that rookie draft inspire you? Like, all right, I want to do another startup, want to look at some of these other drafts, want to draft again, but with the veterans included. We're going to talk about some startups, and we're going to talk about some Dynasty tips in general. This is a great time of year, you know, as far as value is concerned. You know, people overreacting to training camp information perhaps in the coming few weeks. People, you know, really worried about a rookie, you know, maybe like a Kyron Williams situation if you're you know, really in on him, and you know, everyone just worried about Corum. So there's a lot of value to be had this time of year and a lot of fun stuff with Dynasty. So I'm super pumped.
Yeah, this is going to be you leading us on the way. We're just going to give you some tips to your questions along the way too. But Adam, I actually thought about this before leading up into this show, and I think for those who are going off the rails, who are becoming real junkies in the fantasy football world, especially we're talking about this in May. I don't know, man. You're starting to make me more. I think I want to get into a Devy league. What do you think? I think we need to do that at some point.
Devy's fun. I'm in like 1.5, one that's like kind of half Devy and one that's full on, and Devy's
half
fun.
Devy.
I got three kids, man, already. I'm dealing with enough youngsters. I don't know about Devy does seem fun. It's a whole new ball game, whole new window to open for you. But yeah.
So I'll explain the half Devy then just quickly, as far as, you know, a little bit lower maintenance. We draft colleges. We have like certain colleges that we just have the rights to, rather than like, I have to be scouting like 5-star high schoolers. We can just be like, all right, I just believe in the Ohio State pipeline. For the next, like, you know, we do like 3 or 4 years at a time. Then we do an auction every 3-4 years for our colleges. So,
Chase, some of us just don't have enough to do during the day, and I don't mean me.
Yeah, some of us, right? Some of us. I don't know if it's any of us, but somebody doesn't.
You just drop sleep.
All right,
don't need it.
Just look. Albert Einstein, 2 hours a year. It's all he needed. That's all any of us need too, because we need more time for fantasy football. But let's get into it. Our dynasty values today. Adam, lead us off, buddy.
Yeah, we're gonna get into that startup first. You know, I led with that, and let's talk about it. Look, so I gave all of us a single startup talk question. You know, again, this is the time of year you may be inspired to go ahead and join a dynasty startup, and the first thing you do, right? You randomize, you do your derby. In one of my leagues, I'm actually about to start a startup. We picked baseball lines, and then we picked over-unders for the first round basketball games that we are then using, whoever got the most correct, to pick our draft order. for our startup draft. So that's how we're doing it. But derbies, randomizers, however you're going to do it, where do you want to be in your startup? And I posed the question in the outline for you guys as what's the best draft spot. And look, I think everyone knows if you can get your Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, like it's the 1-2. But then after that, I think is where the questions really start, right? Like, do you want the 3? Do you want to hit the middle of the draft? Do you want the turn? Like, that's where it gets like person to person. People might differ. For me, I definitely like the turn after those 2 guys. Like, if I can get a Mahomes to start off a team, if I can Allen to start off a team, want to do those 2 things. But to me, I think those next 2 guys and a lot of startups that I've seen kind of on the timeline so far, this is going to be my first of the summer. It's either Stroud or Hurts or, one of those guys that's coming off the board next. So for me, I'd just rather be on the turn. Briefly, I'm curious what you guys think. We're not going to do that for most of the questions. This is a pretty short one.
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick.
Okay, Chris.
I'm going to jump in real quick. I like the strategy of kind of going at the end, like you're saying, kind of pairing it up. I also like that because you don't have to wait as long, especially when you do leagues like this, Dynasty. We're joking about for the show, joined, how long this process can be when people are drafting sometimes. But I also like my preference would probably be in the middle because I feel like it's where you get the value the best, especially in the first 4 rounds, where these are going to be certain players on the board still be able to kind of, falling to you versus at the end. Sometimes you're getting there in that 4th round or 5th round and you're like, how far do I stretch for some of these guys? So for me, I'm looking at, I like that middle area where you're going to have some value and have some options that, for whether it's receiver, running back, quarterback, you're going to have somebody that you like on your board probably in the middle there.
Chase, what do you think? Ignoring the Mahomes and Allen.
Yeah. I tend to agree with Chris there. It's just if you're doing snake style draft, and not everybody does. Some of them go straight like normal, like the regular NFL draft. But when you're doing snake draft, I like being towards the middle more because I feel like it allows me to the curveballs you get thrown. I don't feel are as curvy because you get to adjust to them sooner rather than, oh great, something's going on here now and I got to wait 18 picks until I'm up again. I just prefer that real steady every 10, 11, 12, whatever picks to have another selection coming up where I can then, make my pick and reset my strategy, I can constantly adjust in closer to in real time, I feel like, than when I'm on one of the turns. And that's the same way for me in redraft as well. I always prefer when I'm somewhere between like 4 and 7. I like that middle range there.
Dan, what do you think?
In a 12-man league, I think I prefer the 8th pick. Yeah, no, I'm totally kidding. It's definitely the middle as well. I just didn't want to be exactly the same as these guys, but you can more easily map out your draft, especially based on ADP when you're drafting in the middle of the round. Because if you're going to go off the ADP map, you say, okay, I have a rough idea. This player, these rounds are going to fall in. I'm going to be in the middle of the round. Therefore, I have an equal shot at these guys in these certain spots. It's just a real easy roadmap unless you're just dying to have, a super flex league. You just want Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen. You want that number 1 pick, make your life easy, get one of the top quarterbacks, and then kind of go from there. But to me, it's either the middle or I want to draft the beginning or I want to be the exact last pick of a draft. Those are the 3 locations that I want to be because I either want the back-to-back on the back end, I want the front end pick, or everything else I just want in the middle. The worst place, in my opinion, is to be, like I said, 8, 9 in a 12-man league. You're just caught out in no man's land 24/7. It's awful. So that's kind of where I fall on it myself a little bit. Not that everybody has a lot of control over where they're going to be picking either.
Yeah.
No, I would say that too, though, if I have to be on a turn, one of the turns, I would prefer to be on that 12, 13 turn towards the end of the first round because I always feel like, oh, hey, I'm getting basically 2 first-round dudes at once rather than having that. Yeah, sure, I get Mahomes or I get Allen. I can get another franchise quarterback later on as well that'll last me just as long. Maybe won't get me quite as many points per game, but I can make up for that elsewhere. I would rather be able to get those 2 first-round level guys than have to wait, and now I'm picking everybody else's leftovers there.
Yeah, and there's almost always, I feel like, at that first pick of the second round, a crazy steal that just happens to fall out of the first because someone, in the no man's land, kind of as you were saying, makes a weird reach or, desperate for a quarterback or whatever. So I like the turn. Definitely agree with you, Dan. Beginning, middle, back turn. Like those are what you want for sure. But let's go right back to you, Dan. All right, so we've decided where we're drafting. Who is the guy that's like, all right, I just exited the first round with this guy. Like, we're good to go. This dynasty is going to be awesome.
Oh, who's the corner still? Well, I think this is actually meant for Chris, was it not?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Or did I misread? Yeah.
That is for Chris, yes. I misread.
Reading skills haven't failed me. All right.
Yeah, so
now.
I'm looking for that cornerstone player, and especially the super flex. I'm looking at Caleb Williams. I mean, look, we're hearing all the different hype about him being Patrick Mahomes. I think it might be a little high, but we know this guy has good scrambling ability. We know he can throw the ball. He's going to have a plethora of weapons. He's got a lot of easy kind of transition with the veteran receivers that kind of ease him in and have long term. He has young guys. His coaching staff's pretty fresh and new there. So overall, I think Caleb Williams is a guy that if you can get your hands on him, that is a franchise-changing situation for you. In one of our dynasty leagues, Dan has Caleb Williams. He made some different moves to kind of land that pick, but that's where you look at him now. All of a sudden, you're like, oh, this guy could be a contender in a year or two. Versus looking for some of these guys and you're hoping, wishing he's going to start. We already know Chicago announced he's week 1 starter. You already know what you're working with. You talk about the kind of draft, how you kind of dictate what you're building your team around. I'm with Chase. I like to have someone kind of control in the sense of what I'm building around. And Caleb Williams is a guy in a great situation where I feel like I can build something around and, be in a position where I kind of control the team moving forward.
Yeah. I mean, when you talk about the first.
I listened to our friend Adam. No, Adam, sorry. I was going to say, I listened to our friend Adam. I trusted the process. I tanked, and I got Caleb Williams number 1. Get out.
I was going to say, look, there's not many guys when you get to the first handful, 3, 4, 5, 6 picks of a startup that can actually beat their ADP just because, how can you beat 3? Yeah. But talk Caleb Williams, who I'm looking at 10, and I've seen him go earlier than that, but you can easily get him at 6 or 7, and that's beatable for Caleb Williams. He could easily be going would any of you be that shocked if he's the chalk 3 next year? I'm not saying I expect that, but I wouldn't be shocked.
No,
not at all. That's my bad.
No, I was going to say, I love it though.
I'm really excited over that.
I was just going to say, looking at the end of the draft, like you're talking about, Adam, that's where the value is. And I think if you can get Caleb Williams maybe in that later for end of the first round, then you come back in that second round where you're going to get another player to kind of lock up with him. You're feeling pretty good where you're standing.
Yeah, 100% agreed. 100% agreed. All right, so
this is the draft I meant to hit.
Always remember, if you ain't first, you're last.
That's what I meant to hit.
Well, since I did trip you up a little bit there, Dan, let me go back to you with my other question, which was focusing in on a specific quarterback. That's Justin Herbert, who, draft capital I've seen all over the place, but we're talking someone who is available in the second round of startups in a lot of cases after being someone who was as high as 5 last year. It was one of the top quarterbacks. So I think we're all on the same page that from a redraft perspective, the offense coming in has kind of dinged him a little bit. But from a dynasty perspective specifically, is he suddenly a really good value just because of the talent and because of, maybe the volume drops a little bit, but efficiency is going to be good? Or is it, look, if this isn't a pass first offense, then even in dynasty, it's just not worth it?
Yeah, that kind of sums up what I'm going to hit at. I've been harping on this all year long, off season, and it's probably going to continue until August. Maybe not so much. The ADP has been dropping, Adam, to your point, as you've said, but even in dynasty leagues, it's still a bit high. I mean, the last thing I was checking, I'm not sure where you're pulling the ADP from, but he was still at quarterback 8 right now, as far as dynasty startup leagues go. At least on Fantasy Pros, he was just behind Richardson, just a little bit ahead of Jordan Love. And there's a range of quarterbacks there that I'm sorry. I like more. I do. I like the Loves and the Richardsons more. I like the Jaden Daniels more. It's just that ceiling's gone. And unless Justin Herbert turn in to Daniel Jones as far as his scrambling legs, I don't see where this fantasy floor is going to necessarily come from. Jim Harbaugh got paid a buttload of money. He's not going anywhere anytime soon. So when you're talking about this from a long-term perspective, well, he's going to be stuck with his coaching staff for a minute. And because Harbaugh and Greg Roman are going to give the Chargers an identity that frankly, they haven't had since Marty Schottenheimer, this team's going to win games. So I don't think they're going to go anywhere anytime soon. I don't think Greg Roman's necessarily going to go anywhere anytime soon as a result either. I mean, Roman's never been in the top 9 or never been outside the top 9 in rush attempt offense. He's never been out of the bottom third except for 1 year in pass attempts, and that was actually with Jim Harbaugh back in San Francisco. And the 1 year they absolutely sucked, and everybody left the farm after that season, essentially. So with the Ravens, it's never always been inside the top 10. Herbert, himself, even with the volume he's had, and this is a guy who's averaged 39 pass attempts a game over the last 3 years in a row leading up to this point, he's been fantasy roller coastery even with the volume. I mean, he was a QB2 in 2021. Then he was a QB 17 in 2022. Last year on a points per game basis, he was QB 11. But he's been all over the map even with the volume heading his direction. So from that standpoint, and then Keenan Allen's gone and Mike Williams is gone. I love Ladd McConkey, but that's one weapon. Everyone's trying to get excited about Josh Palmer being a sleeper. We do remember this is Josh Palmer, right? Like he's like the wide receiver 4 on a good team. Like let's not forget that. So I'm failing to see where the volume comes from. If you're not going to have volume, then you have to have efficiency. Ask CJ Stroud, ask Brock Purdy, but he's not set up to have that kind of efficiency. This offense isn't set up to have that kind of efficiency. So when I break all these things down, I just don't mathematically see where it's going to happen for Herbert, like I said, unless he turns into Daniel Jones with his legs. So no, I'm not on board. I have him more as a mid-level QB2. I think he's the most talented QB2 of your life, but unfortunately, that's where he's going to stay.
Dan, let me ask you a question real quick. I don't want to jump, hijack your part, Adam, but with that, do you think the consistency could, maybe be different with having a different system? And you talked about Greg Roman and his propensity to run the ball. I think we all know Jim Harbaugh can prefer to run the ball, but Jim Harbaugh didn't have Andrew Luck and was able to kind of make him productive in college. Now this is a different game in a sense, but what I'm pointing out is that has Greg Roman ever had a quarterback like Justin Herbert? He's always had mobile guys, like Tyrod Taylor, Lamar Jackson, etc. Colin Kaepernick in San Francisco. Would you think it could be different, where it could be more efficient, where with the weapons, offensive linemen, quote unquote, that Jim Harbaugh talks about, that his line, maybe there's more big plays available. If Justin Herbert has a big arm, maybe he is more efficient. It has consistency that kind of you see stabilize versus the up and down, where the Chargers have always been up and down.
Unless they hire a pass game coordinator, no, because it's been well documented that Greg Roman, when it comes to the passing game, is completely and utterly inept. Receivers didn't not want to play in Baltimore because of Lamar Jackson. Receivers didn't want to play in Baltimore because they didn't want to run the Greg Roman Madden 98 vanilla concepts. So from that standpoint, no, unless they change that part of it, I don't think this changes into anything spectacular. The closest thing he has had to a pocket passing quarterback was Alex Smith for like a year. That's the closest thing we saw. And Alex Smith is not the same type of quarterback as Justin Herbert. So that's comparing apples to oranges to begin with. But so to that point, do we have some uncertainty, some unknown to some degree? But I also know what he calls from a passing game concept. And right now he's the guy who's running the entire game plan. So no, I don't think so.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think it's an interesting question because kind of to your point about him being like the most talented QB2 ever, like I think he is more talented than all the guys around him. So it is hard when I am definitely of the philosophy, and I think a lot of us are, that generally speaking, talent wins out over time. That's kind of the key to Dynasty, is you get the talented guys, and over time it typically works out. But it gets really interesting when he is, kind of to your point, tied to this coach for, I mean, we talk about 3-year windows a lot as well, at least 3 years. Harbaugh's going to get at least 3 years. Roman probably gets at least 3 years. So that makes this situation specifically really fascinating, I think. Good points. I struggle with him not being a value, but I do think he's going to fall a little bit more throughout the summer. So I do think he'll probably work his way into being a buy by August, but I don't think it's there yet. For me personally. At any rate, Chase, we're going to come back around to you. We're going to go. We just talked about our veteran. We have talked about Caleb, but otherwise, as far as rookies go, this is the other risk, you're kind of swinging in the first 2 rounds. There's like the Herbert, the guy that's clearly talented, but the situation's getting a little wonky, so that's why he's kind of dropping down the boards. And then it's, okay, we have these uber talented rookies and second-year guys we haven't seen a ton of, right? There's Caleb Williams is, a fringe first-round guy. Marvin Harrison Jr., first-round-ish guy, early second. Then there's like Stroud, Richardson, Bijan Robinson, who are all in the top 24 in startups. Richardson, we only saw 4 games. Stroud, we saw a full season, but it were less than 4,000 career passing yards. And then Bijan Robinson was just barely 1,000-yard runner, if I'm not mistaken. And these are all guys that, very talented. I'm not denying that, but from fantasy perspective, it's hard to take that swing, at least in my opinion, in the very top of a startup draft. But I'm curious to see what you have to say.
Well, first off, on the Bijan thing, FAS, forget Arthur Smith. But to move on to the larger point, I personally am comfortable spending a startup first or second on one of these first or second year guys, one of these young guys that's unproven. But that tends to play into my overall philosophy when I'm talking about startup drafts and dynasty anyway. You need to have your overarching concept when you come into a dynasty startup. You can't just go in willy-nilly and shoot from the hip and think you're gonna set something up for long-term success there. Are you one of those guys that wants to treat it more like the redraft and go for win now, and in which case you're probably a little more risk averse in terms of these younger guys? Or are you going for that productive struggle, or you punting your first and second year and trying to gain assets for down the road kind of thing? I tend to be one of those that likes to go for the youth early, tends to want to try and acquire assets and set myself up for the long term for year 3 or 4 and beyond. So I'm completely comfortable taking a guy like a Stroud, like a Richardson, like a Caleb Williams. If you look at the ECR, you look at the expert consensus rankings right now for dynasty leagues. 4 of the top 12 dynasty quarterbacks in the rankings right now are first or second year guys. You got Stroud, you got Richardson, you got Caleb Williams, you got Jaden Daniels. They're in the top 12. They're QB1s. We kind of talked before when we were talking about, our favorite spot in the draft. I said, you don't have to get Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen at 1 or 2 to be successful in fantasy, to be successful at dynasty. There's more than one way to skin a cat. There's more than one way to construct a roster. Yes, you want to be solid at quarterback, but you can do that in other ways. If you get that young guy, if you hit on that young guy, yes, Jamarcus Russell happens, but if you hit on that young guy, you've got him for years at the quarterback position in theory. Listen, anybody can step off of a curb tomorrow and be a bygone, right? It's completely possible that, you go out and you draft Jaden Daniels and you're excited about it and he looks really good for you this year. And then 2-3 years from now, he's sitting next to Robert Griffith III on a pregame show somewhere on Thursday nights. But you have to you have to do your research and be comfortable in who you're taking right now and look at your philosophy. I like taking the young guys. 2 of the top 12 running backs right now are first or second year guys, in Bijan and Devin Achan, whatever they want to call him, Achan. 3 of the top 12 wide receivers in Harrison, Puka, Neighbors. 3 of the top 12 tight ends, including Sam Laporta, who is a top 16 overall ranked dynasty asset right now. If you're in a deep league, it's not the dumbest thing to come out of there with Sam Laporta, and as long as he stays healthy, which is a question with anybody on the board, you're set at tight end for maybe the next decade. You don't have to worry about the most frustrating position in the game. There's no reason not to take those risks. And listen, if your first round guy busts, there's 22, 23, however many other rounds that you're still picking dudes up. There's all the in-season maintenance you have to do. There's the rookie draft coming up next year. If your very first overall pick sinks you dynasty, redraft, or otherwise, you need to reevaluate how you're building your entire, roster and how you're managing your team to begin with. So I have no problem coming out of a first round of a startup draft with a guy like a Caleb Williams.
Yeah, I agree with you, but it is always a little bit more scary, I guess, a little more concerning than some of these more established guys. But to the earlier point with Caleb Williams, and I think it's true for all of those guys, that's really the only way you're going to outswing the ADP, right? Because Mahomes can't really beat 2 other than pass Allen. There's only so much you can do. And guys only play in this league for so long. We know that. We know guys only play in this league for so long. We know that there are those soft walls in terms of age, like 26, 27 for running backs and 30 for a wide receiver and 30 something in there for a quarterback, and for a tight end, it's early 30s. We know that those are there. So you can take a guy closer to that, and that's great. But are you taking a guy that you're going to have for a year or two? Or are you playing the economic game, like setting up your retirement fund? And are you taking those risks early where you can get the most return on that investment over the long haul? Or are you playing it safe like you're closer to retirement? So totally. Hey,
plus, so many people have said Caleb Williams is the new Patrick Mahomes. It must be true at this point. Only everybody concentrating.
Exactly.
If 1,000 people say it, it has to be true.
Well, yeah, a lot of people say a lot of things about a lot of things, but they have done a good job of setting that dude up. And listen, Patrick Mahomes wasn't the Patrick Mahomes you thought you had last year. I mean, nobody is a guarantee. Nobody is. We know that.
Hey, all right, look, let's keep it rookie talk. I feel like we've talked enough about the big names, right? Yes, you have won the first round if you came away with Caleb Williams or Marvin Harrison Jr. in a rookie draft. Congratulations, you've won. You did it. Good job. Pat yourself on the back.
I like it a lot.
And then shut up.
Yeah, exactly. Like, cool. What I think is what makes a great draft, outside of those two guys, which I'll give you, what makes a great draft, like a fantastic draft, is when you can go through rounds 2 or 3 or 4 or, into the waiver wire. If you can hit a home run with one of those, like, for instance, last year, right? If you got Puka off of waivers, or in the 4th round, or if you got a Laporta in the 3rd or a Tank Dell in the 3rd, if you're a rebuild, that might push you up a year. That could literally save you real life dollars because of contending a year earlier and getting in the money a year earlier. Like, that could, if you're already contender, suddenly instead of needing to sell off because your assets are aging out, you're still good because you replaced one late. Like, hitting later on is a game changer in Dynasty. So that's what I want to talk about. We're going to go down the list, but starting at the 2nd round, because the 1st round's boring. We've talked enough about the 1st round this offseason. So, Dan, kick us off. Who is the guy that is going to, drastically change your outcomes in round 2? Or at least is going to be your homer in round 2?
Take notes.
Yeah, so for me, the big winner, because you're looking at this draft, right? It's loaded with wide receiver. It was loaded with quarterback, especially in the 1st round if you were super flex. The place where you're dying to get that positional advantage because they're fewer and far between, especially in today's league, is that running back position. And this year, there's been a couple of running backs that we've talked about that we liked for different reasons, but there wasn't a clear-cut GOAT guy. There wasn't a clear-cut number 1 guy. A lot of people like Jonathan Brooks. Some of us like Trey Benson, whatever the case may be. But right now in the 2nd round, in the middle of the 2nd round, Blake Corum's ADP is 18th overall, which is the middle of the 2nd round of a 12-team league. It's behind Jonathan Brooks, behind Trey Benson. Okay, not that surprising. It's one spot behind Jalen Wright right now. And I know fast running backs go to Miami. Everybody starts feeding in the corner like a raccoon with rabies. I need that guy. He's going to be 3rd string for at least another year.
Yep. Blake
Corum walks into a situation year 1 where maybe he is actually significantly worked into the work share. I'm not necessarily counting on that in redraft leagues. I do think this is Kyron's job until Kyron gets injured. With his size, that's been the issue. He missed 5 games last season. And what we know is that with the Rams, McVay likes to ride one guy. And he's not afraid to give a smaller guy, like a Kyron Williams, red zone opportunities, like something Blake Corum proved he could do in Michigan already. So Corum, he walks in, he's a 1-for-1 handcuff for Kyron Williams, who, by the way, was the RB2 overall in points per game last year, second to only Christian McCaffrey. Blake Corum could do exactly what Kyron Williams did when and if given the opportunity, probably more like when rather than if. If it's not this year, it will be in 2025. So if you're looking for a running back, because that's the biggest weakness position in most dynasty leagues, because you've been hammering at wide receiver because they last longer, right? There's more of them, so you've been drafting more of them early. You're dying to find that extra running back. Every dynasty league I'm in, everyone's trying to trade for a running back. So get one who could actually be the best of this class, and he's going RB3, RB4 off the board in rookie draft leagues. That is Blake Corum. He's got great vision. He was injured last season, or coming off an injury last season with the ACL. So there's a real chance there's a pop that we didn't see on tape last year that maybe he has going into this season. There's just nothing. I don't see a bigger value than Blake Corum in the second round. Just don't.
Yeah, I can't hate on it too much. I like it. Look, I was going into the process one of the bigger Corum detractors, I'll say. Not quite a Corum hater, but a Corum detractor. But I mean, you got to be honest. Sean McVay put on, I mean, look, he came out. He was boy wonder when he first came into the Rams coaching position. To me, last season was by far the most impressed I've been with him. I mean, that was an insane coaching job. That was not a team that I think any reasonable person expected to be fairly good. And it was like really competitive, especially down the stretch. So first of all, Sean McVay is in his bag right now. And then the number 2 piece of it is, if Corum gets the starting job, or at least the lion's share of the work, or even a 60-40, he's an RB1. Like, not of this class, like an RB1. Like, if you're the number 1 Sean McVay, number 1 Sean McVay running back, you're an RB1. Like, especially now with very few workhorses being left, if he gets 65% plus of the attempts or touches for the running back position in that offense, he's an RB1. And I don't think that upside exists with the rest of these guys, more or less. So, got to give it to you. I again wasn't the biggest Corum guy coming in, but that situation is hard to deny that the upside's insane. He has a much easier pathway to being the best running back in this class than the rest of them.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it. Always good to get the process, man. Stamp of approval.
Yep. All right, look, on to the third round. This is the one again. I talked about, Tank Dell and Laporta. Those were third round guys. I would call Tyjae Spears last year in the third a solid double. Not quite a homer, but you got on base for sure. It's good value in the third. So it's one where the third round is when the hit rate. Yeah, the hit rate really starts to drop in the third. There's normally guys you can get steals on in the second, but it really comes down once you get to the third, fourth, and these other guys. So for me this year, the guy that really sticks out to me, and I hate that I'm going to just keep talking about him this offseason, and it's Jermaine Burton. It is. It has to be. And look, I looked at the third round ADPs, like, all right, I don't want to say Jermaine Burton again. Like, I've done it the last 3 shows, and then I probably skipped the best ball episode, and then the past 3 shows before that. But look, I have him at 27. It's slightly differing, super late second to mid third, depending on where you're getting your ADP. But for me, of these guys, Ben Sinnott, Marshawn Lloyd, Malachi Corley, Jatavion Sanders, Javon Baker, who's a solid value in and of itself. Like, of those guys, it's Jermaine Burton by a long shot. Like, he's going to be a starter pretty clearly in a Joe Burrow offense. Joe Burrow does like to push the ball down the field. I think it's a really good fit for him. I think it's more likely than not that someone else is taking Tyler Boyd's snaps that he lost, that role, whether it's Eric All at tight end or whether it's T. Higgins. Kind of the underneath stuff I think is going somewhere else. So he's going to get some valuable deep shots, I think. And again, I think in this offense, that's going to be, pretty good for fantasy success, at least if any deep threat's doing anything in the league, the way defenses were last year. But I think he has the highest chance for upside relative to the guys going around him. So I'm taking that swing in the third. And even on contenders, I've been trading into the third when I can to take that swing.
I like Adam.
All right.
And Jermaine Burton all the way. No, I think that's a good. No, I think he makes a great point, though. I think when you get to that different tier receiver, now you're looking for guys who have upside and positions that, Cincinnati has a lot of different mouths to feed, but they're going to be reducing as they move forward. But they have a quarterback who's going to be there long term. So you're looking to try to get a piece of that action.
Absolutely. All right. Moving on to you in the fourth round. I'll keep it over in your corner.
Yeah, so this is a little tough for me because I think sometimes, what we're projected to go in the fourth round usually isn't there. So the first guy I want to give to you, if he's possibly there, is Luke McCaffrey. Luke McCaffrey is a guy who I just absolutely think has upside in that Washington offense. Is probably going to wind up being the slot receiver sooner than later. Might not open up as that guy, but Domby Brown's not going to hold him on the bench very long, I don't think. And we look at Kingsbury and what he kind of likes to do is offense. He likes to get those short passes to those guys who run the option routes. Luke McCaffrey's a guy who can line inside, outside. Terry McLaurin is going to probably be the mouth to feed. Where I love Jahan Dotson, but still to be determined he's going to be where he's going to fit in this offense long term. But Luke McCaffrey's a guy who can kind of grow up with Jaden Daniels in a sense, a guy that maybe you can get by low, but has a lot of outstanding potential. Comes from a good family and also has a lot of upside. Just converting to receiver 2 years ago.
Totally. Look, I almost, in an effort to not say Jermaine Burton, I almost stole him because he was like fringe, and I've seen him go in the third a lot, and I was like, I'd rather draft him in the third than a lot of these guys that are actually ADP in the third. But he was a fourth ADP, so I was like, no, I'll leave him.
And real quick,
Adam, you had to get your 2 hits of Jermaine Burton in, okay? You had to get the 2 hits in.
Exactly.
There's a difference. There's a difference between planting your flag for a guy and just seeing your flagpole rise for a guy, and you're walking a fine line right now, Adam. I love it. Jermaine Burton's a good football player, but
I mean, we're talking about a guy I'm home running in the third.
Yeah. Tune in next Wednesday, folks.
Yeah, I'm going to start moving him up a round per week.
How many times can we fit him in? Every episode. The process of Jermaine Burton. We got 2 shots. All right, we're working on our shot game, guys. It's coming. It's coming for this show.
Nice, very nice. So if Luke McCaffrey's not on the available for you, I think the other guy you want to go with is Ray Davis. This is a guy Dan talked about, during this process of the offseason, going into the draft, after the draft. What do you kind of like about his ability? A guy who could probably play 3 downs, a guy who's a good pass protector, has a nice body. And look, James Cook's been pretty good, but James Cook hasn't shown you he's a workhorse back. And one thing that seems to be determined this offseason is Buffalo is committed to running the ball. Ever since the change in offensive coordinator, this team is running the ball a lot. And you see that kind of carry through. You saw Ty Johnson, getting the ball. You saw different guys being involved. Leonard Fournette, for God's sakes, got scraped off and was out there a couple of times. So when I look at this offense in general, James Cook, what's he going to be long term? I'm not really sure. Ray Davis has a potential to kind of steal his backfield moving forward, but at least split carries early on. Guys would probably be better in the cold in Buffalo and in second half of the season, going to New England, Jets, New York, stuff like that. And a guy who I think can also catch the ball. So I like Ray Davis as a guy that, maybe you can find that, as Dan talked about, that running back, you want to kind of add to your roster to kind of swing for the fences. It might end up being one of the better running backs out of this draft.
Yeah, I don't hate it.
Yeah, Adam, if you guys get 2 hits of Jermaine Burton, I got to get 2 hits of Ray Davis. So we're on the same boat when it comes to that. 100%. James Cook, not a goal line back. They brought Leonard Fournette basically out of retirement just to run inside the 5-yard line towards the end of the season last year. They don't want to give him that role. Ray Davis, similar to Blake Corum, smaller back, does do well in short yardage situations. So yeah, Chris, 100% with you. That's the guy who is going more in the third round that I like a lot too. So I just wanted to piggyback on that.
Plus, I like to build my fantasy rosters out of high character guys. Ray Davis, a high character guy, because when you get more Ray Davises on your roster, you have fewer Rashee Rices, and you don't have to worry about headlines.
Is that a problem in your fantasy locker room?
It's a problem on a couple of my fantasy locker rooms.
I love that when people talk about
knock it off, Rashee. I know, right?
I know you're kidding around. But I've heard people talk about how like they won't draft like the Michael Vick back in the day, for instance, because of what he did off the field. I'm like, what in God's name does that have to do with anything to do with your fantasy roster? You don't have an actual physical locker room. You do understand this, right?
Right. Like I'm not mad at Jack Black because freaking Bowser kidnapped Peaches in the Mario movie. Like you got to separate shit.
That's how we know you have kids.
Hey, I probably would have gone to that one with or without them. But I have seen it twice in the theater.
It's got a rising flagpole for Peaches.
All right, Chase, we're gonna keep it in your corner with after the draft. You're blowing your fab load. Who is it on?
With your hand.
Wait a minute.
Half Debbie blowing your load. Oh, your Debbie.
Family show. It was.
I fit fab between those two words.
I am the one who brought up the flagpole, so let's post draft waiver wire guys. Like, so when I'm looking at this, I'm looking at guys whose ADPs are typically falling outside the top 50. If you got a 12 team league, most of the dynasty teams that I own, we do four round drafts. 12 team league, four rounds, 48 guys. So guys outside the top 50, right at that, and pass is what I'm looking at here. And we kind of talked about it. At this point, these guys are all dart throws, crap shoots, taxi squad stashes. If you've got a taxi squad in your league, which is a nice feature to have, nice little ace in the hole there you can have to continue our metaphors there. But listen, one of the things I like to do is I like to look for, when I'm looking at these guys, who is bringing something to the team that drafted them or picked them up, who's bringing something different to that team that they didn't already have on the roster, or who landed in a great situation where, there's you can see the path, the trail is clear for how they get on the field. So, first off, to look at guys that landed in decent situations in terms of, not necessarily giving you points right now, but down the road, dart throws that are going late. Jordan Travis, the quarterback for the Jets, and Michael Pratt, the quarterback that got drafted by Green Bay, are two guys that I like. Between the two, I'm big on Travis because I think, listen, Aaron Rodgers is not Tom Brady. He's proven that in several ways. I don't think he's going to play for the next 10 years. And, Jordan Travis gets to sit there, gets to learn behind him. He's surrounded by a ton of talent if and when he gets his shot. They've done a good job of adding guys to that team, offensive weapons to that team. I think that they are trying to build that team, to be long-term successful. They need some guys to hit on the offensive line. But the other thing I like about Jordan Travis is that he's got some of that mobility. And we know that in fantasy, mobility can be a big, big deal for a quarterback to store you some points. So if you're going to take a shot that late, if you're going to, if you're going to be trying to prioritize a guy after the draft is over, especially, in a super flex format or a 2-quarterback format where you've got quarterbacks are gold, Jordan Travis is a guy you can take a shot on. Michael Pratt probably isn't going to score you any points as long as he's wearing a Green Bay jersey, but he landed in a spot where they like to develop quarterbacks. He's got a good system there to learn, a good place for him to land there. You're hoping for the Jimmy G trajectory with Michael Pratt, though, because they do have their young quarterback of the future and of now in Jordan Love. But Michael Pratt, again, another guy that, especially if you've got a taxi squad, I'm looking at him. Running back wise, Rasheen Ali, Baltimore Ravens there. Listen, it's a Ravens running back. King Henry is not going to last forever. And Ravens running backs, while they're not always necessarily fantasy gold, they are always fantasy relevant. And there is a very real situation where Rasheen Ali in a year or two is the first and second down back in Baltimore. He's a nice pass catcher, so he doesn't have to come off the field on third down, depending on what happens with Keaton Mitchell's recovery from his ACL injury. He's been comped to Jerome Ford, and Jerome Ford was very nice on the field for the Browns last year in fantasy when Nick Chubb went down. If you got Jerome Ford type, production from Rasheen Ali in a year or two, that'd be a absolute home run as a post-draft pickup. Otherwise, at running back, the cupboard's kind of bare. Everybody's getting drafted that means anything unless you believe in Frank Gore's genetics, and then you'll have him till 2040. But otherwise, a couple of names real quick to throw out. A couple of 6'6" guys, towers of power. They're Johnny Wilson in Philadelphia. You can't teach 6'6". You can't train for 6'6". I've been trying for 28 years. I'm still 13 inches short. But there is an opening for a wide receiver 3 there. There is an opening for a number 3 target if and when Dallas Goedert misses time. He hasn't played a full 16-game schedule since his freshman rookie year. But listen, even Julio Jones, who is, I think, 987 years old, had 2 scores on 4 red zone targets last year. There is possibility there for something to happen for Johnny Wilson. And then Jared Wiley, tight end. Yeah, it could happen. Jared Wiley in Kansas City there. He is the latest heir apparent to Taylor Swift's boyfriend. But like I said, 6'6", he runs well. He's going to have Patrick Mahomes for his quarterback, ostensibly for his entire career, you would think. So, again, you're taking a shot in the dark at this point, in your roster build. Anyway, Jared Wiley, a guy that if you've got room, if you've got a taxi squad spot, I would jump on that.
Totally. Hey, I really like those first 3 in the sense that there are a few truths in fantasy football that seem to be true, and it's that Tyrod Taylor's backup's going to play. A former Packers third stringer is going to play somewhere, at some point.
Quarterback, yeah. Right.
And the Ravens third string running back is going to play. So
right. And Justice Hill is still there, and Justice Hill has been that third Ravens running back, it seems like, since 1999 or so. But
he's number 2, he has less value.
Right, yeah. Now, yeah, he's moved up because Gus and J.K. Dobbins caught the plane across the way there. But
Ball West.
Yeah, right. But yeah, there is a path. Like I said, there's a path to Rasheen Ali being at least the first and second down back, if not more, in the near future. And if you could get that for free, essentially, you would take that every day.
All right, so we have officially exited Draftland with that piece of fab-related info. And now we're let's buy some guys, let's sell some guys. Hey, Chris, let's get back at you. And we're rebuilding. We're down to the dumps. Maybe we aged out. Maybe our startup stunk. Maybe we did go with a rookie in the first round of our startup and he stunk. And it didn't work out. We're rebuilding. What are the moves that you would be making in that situation?
Yeah, so for me, there's a couple of things I'll give you. Some buys I've been looking at right there is I'm looking for something to kind of, the 3-year window. Guys I'm looking for that haven't quite hit their upside, but have the upside are still young. So I'm looking at Atlanta offense and Drake London. Drake London has a lot of potential. And one of the things I like to point out, everybody can bash what they want with Michael Penix in the pick. That means Drake London's going to have a quarterback for probably at least 5 to 6 years. That's going to be talented and easily transition with and have a chemistry with. A guy who's going to be able to get paid in Atlanta because of the setup that they have in Atlanta, where in 2 years when he's due for his big contract and could be $40 million by then for these receivers, he's going to be able to get paid because now they're on a rookie contract paying Michael Penix. But not just Drake London, because I think his potential that he has, that we haven't kind of seen untapped in a sense with being free of Arthur Smith, as Chase pointed out. I also think Zach Robinson brings a lot of different things that we've seen kind of that project across the board for offenses. We've seen Nico Collins, for example, in Houston have a breakout. We've seen guys, for those Minnesota offenses and those Rams offense like Puka, Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp be one of the guys who can just basically win you fantasy leagues by themselves. So you look to just buy into that kind of offense and a guy who can kind of be featured in those type of roles. That's a guy I love. And real quick, his teammates aren't bad buys to me either, where maybe people aren't as high on Bijan because he got maybe 1,000 yards. But if you're going to go get a running back, you're going to spend some draft capital on something, or you're going to take a wild card shot. Dan talked about some guys who are sick around. I love Blake Corum, but if I can get Bijan for a future pick or something I can kind of get my hands on now, I want to buy him up because I think he's going to be a guy that you can have for your next 4 to 6 years. Could be your BJ, your McCaffrey or Eckler back in the day. And then Kyle Pitts, I feel like a masochist right here. I keep beating on people from Atlanta and Kyle Pitts, but we've seen these tight ends in these offenses once again. We've seen T.J. Hawkinson break out. Yeah, it is terrible. But we see T.J. Hawkinson have, a renaissance with his career in a sense from getting out of Detroit and in the Minnesota offense and becoming a feature target. You see different tight ends be able to utilize. And I trust Zach Robinson to actually have a clue what to do with Kyle Pitts versus Arthur Smith, who just seemed to hate the man. So I think we put all those things together. A nice buy low guy who's still very, very young as a tight end prospect. And maybe people are just sick and tired of having Kyle Pitts. Maybe you throw a couple picks at them or a couple players at them. Try to get your hands on a future tight end who could be a game changer moving forward as Kelsey gets older, as different tight ends get older. Speaking of my sell, we talked about some different sells, before the show, but I'm going to kind of go off the board a little bit with my sell, and I'm going to go stick to tight end position. Dan kind of talking about, rarity in different positions and running back importance. We always like to get our hands on tight ends, but we saw a lot of guys have breakout years last year in a sense. A lot of guys who were really highly valued have nowhere to kind of go down. An Njoku, an Evan Ingram, guys who, are they going to be as consistent? Are they going to be these Hawkinsons next, 3 or 4 years? Or are these guys like a Hawkinson who gets hurt and it could be, somebody who's now you're trying to figure out what you're going to do long-term in your dynasty roster. So I'm looking at those older tight ends. Adam, you turned me on to running backs, looking at the 27, 28-year-old. They have those drops and they're kind of in their production out of nowhere. Looking at the tight ends who over 27, 28, who had kind of a good year or two, and maybe you're not really consistently, thrilled with them, or you're looking at some of the weapons they're getting, around them now, and they're not going to be featured like they were, like a Dalton Schultz maybe in Texans because they have the Stephon Diggs. Or you have, like I said, in Minnesota, it was kind of evolving the situation where you have Addison, you have Justin Jefferson. What will T.J. Hawkinson come back to? Such as the quarterback position. So I think that's where you're going to look at some of these older tight ends. I'm going to try to get what I can get for those. If I have some on my roster, I'm in a rebuild situation. I want to get my hands on as much draft capital or younger players as possible.
Totally. I like it. So those moves worked out. That's great. Now you're coming out of your rebuild. Chase, let's kick it up to you. We're exiting our rebuild. We're ready to start winning. Well, what do you got for us?
Yeah, well, so if you feel like you're coming out of a rebuild, but you're not quite there yet, you're kind of a contender, not quite yet, but you've been spending all this, draft capital lately in that, you're looking to hit some home runs right now, but you're not ready to go all in on the win now, guys. You're not ready to trade for that 29-year-old running back that, to push you over the top. I've got a couple guys that I'm looking at in terms of guys that I think are in situations where you can get them for cheaper because maybe you don't want to blow all of your capital that you still have. You don't want to blow all of that right now, trying to push you over the top if you're not right there yet. Bryce Young, quarterback out of Carolina there right now, is a guy that I think can be had for a little bit cheaper. People are, the guy that drafted him or girl that drafted him, whoever the hell drafted him last year, might be a little down on him after the year that he had last season. He struggled. The whole team struggled. He struggled because the whole team struggled. They didn't give him a whole hell of a lot there. But they have done a good job. They've had a decent offseason in terms of support for him. They bring in, through the draft, they bring in Xavier Legette. They bring in Jonathan Brooks. They bring in Jatavian Sanders. They bring in Deontay Johnson for him. So he's got a legitimate receiving core now. Adam Thielen is still there, a guy that we know he's comfortable with. They still have, Jonathan Mingo is still there.
Just two of them now.
Right, yeah, right. But they have brought guys in. Plus, the biggest thing of the whole thing is they have invested in that offensive line. They still have Ekwonu at left tackle. Taylor Moton actually had not a bad year at right tackle for them, but they have completely revamped the middle of that offensive line. They bring in Lewis. They bring in Hunt at the 2 guard positions. They're going to switch Austin Corbett to center. I think that they're going to be much improved up front. And if Bryce Young can have a little bit, if he's not afraid for his life every time he hears a pass called in his helmet, I think he can be much, much more effective. And like I said, you might be able to convince his manager to sell him to you for relatively low. You may not have to blow a ton of that capital that you've amassed. But the other guy that I'm looking at is Jahan Dotson. We kind of mentioned him earlier. Again, we forget, he was disappointing last year. He was disappointing. There's no way around that. But think back to his rookie season, and he had a pretty nice fantasy playoff run in 2022 in his rookie season. He scored you like 3-4 touchdowns during the fantasy playoffs there. He had a nice run there. He's only 24 years old. Scary Terry, I love Scary Terry McLaurin. He's a great receiver. He's 28. He's getting up there in terms of that. And those aren't the kinds of guys you necessarily want to be buying in Dynasty. You want to be holding them or selling them. Dotson's only 24 years old. Listen, the talent is there. The quarterback play has not been for him for 2 years. They invested highly in Jaden Daniels. They're bringing him in this year. I'm willing to bet that you can get Dotson for a discount compared to what you could have gotten him for, or maybe should have paid for him last offseason. So again, like I said, a couple guys where if you're not completely convinced that you're at that contender status yet, you don't want to be blowing all of your budget on high price guys only to finish 4th or 5th in the league and completely, send you to mediocrity. A couple of guys I think you can look for. Selling guys, I'm going to kind of take a little bit of a page out of Chris's book. I'm looking at aging wide receivers who were top 10 guys, but who are in situations where they can give you a hell of a lot of return. And if you have been rebuilding correctly, if you've been doing your dynasty rebuild correctly, you should be relatively stacked, honestly, at wide receiver. That's the proper way to go about it. Get yourself squared away at quarterback, get yourself squared away at wide receiver, because they're the two longest lived positions. And so if you have been rebuilding, you should be stacked at wide receiver. I'm looking at guys like Tyreek Hill, who is 30 years old, has more kids than years in his life, I think, at this point. And that's just this offseason. He keeps having kids all over the place, but he's last year's wide receiver too. You're going to be able to get a nice return on a Tyreek Hill, on name alone, if you can find the right buyer for him. Last year's wide receiver 6, DJ Moore, is 27. He's the youngest of these guys. But again, coming off a career year, he's got a nice quarterback coming in. It's like you can sell somebody on his situation. You can get a very, very good return on him, but he is aging up there where, he's on the line of, do you want to keep him or not? Wide receiver 9 from last year, Stephon Diggs, I think, is the one that everybody kind of probably agrees on this right now, or if you've been paying attention. He's going to a new situation. Second verse, same as the first. He kind of got unhappy with the situation where he was, got his way out of town. Now he's somewhere else. He's still a good receiver. He's got a good guy to throw to him. He's going to be the wide receiver 1 on that team. But again, Stephon Diggs is 30 years old. He's aging out of your dynasty target window, and you still should be able to get something in return for him if you can sell him off. Devontae Adams, 31 years old. Again, another guy you can maybe get something good for. And look at his situation coming in this year. Who is going to be throwing him the ball? No one knows. Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell, the third string punter. Nobody has any idea. And the last guy on this list, again, Deebo Samuel, a guy that I've never really been big in. I've never had a ton of shares on him. But I love watching Deebo Samuel play some football. He is 28 years old, however, though, and that is a situation in flux there in terms of their roster and their receiving core, and Brandon Ayuk and Ricky Pearsall and George Kittle and Deebo and everybody else that's around there. These are all guys you might be able to get a mid to late first for, depending on the depth of your league, depending on whether you're single quarterback, double quarterback format. Turn on the charm, get on the phone, and get yourself a return for these guys, because you should still be able to get some good production out of your receiver core, even without one of these guys on your roster, if you've been doing your rebuild correctly.
I like it. Hey, I mean, Chris was talking about that age cliff at running back, and if you really look at Deebo as a running back, he's basically there.
He's right. He's literally on the cliff.
So
he's 10 pounds skinnier, guys. That's all I have to say. He's 10 pounds skinnier, reportedly, from OTA.
Well, there we go. Thanks.
So he's trying to be more receiver-like.
He also dropped the 9 in his jersey down the 1. So it all goes.
It's gonna be thinner. It's gonna be able to fit through those holes better.
There we go. Moving on to so we went from being straight up rebuild to our first year is getting in the win column. Now we're just straight up contender. So for me, I'm just gonna go through a couple names here. The guys, I'll start sell. Look, I like these guys a lot. I think they're good players, and actually, this is where there can be some synergy between someone like me and someone like Chris, where I can go, or even Chase, and go, hey Chase, I have Chris Olave. You have Tyreek Hill that you want to sell. If I'm already contending, Chris Olave is getting wide receiver 2 numbers. I don't think the quarterback situation is getting any better. I don't think the head coach situation is getting much better, at least in the near future. So, for my best interest to win this year, get my money, Tyreek Hill might be, a little interesting to me. And for you, obviously, Chris Olave is a great player, will be better long term. But I'm trying to win today, this year. So Tyreek Hill might be super interesting. So Olave and Garrett Wilson, I think both fit the bill as kind of sells. I think if you're a straight up contender, like, maybe I was deep in the playoffs last year, it didn't work out. My core is getting a little bit older. I've got 2-3 shots at, winning, and then it's off back into the rebuild part of the cycle. A Tyreek Hill would be an interesting buy. A Cooper Kupp would be an interesting buy. Using those types of pieces, those guys that are like Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, they're getting you wide receiver 2 value, but in Dynasty, they're wide receivers, I believe, like 8 and 9, or maybe 8 and 10, somewhere in there. So they're being valued over their current production because, like, we all agree, their long-term production is going to be a lot better. But yeah, so those are the guys that I'd be selling. And again, like Tyreek Hill is an interesting one. At the right cost, Travis Kelce can be a really interesting one. Keenan Allen is a pretty solid buy for a contender. This is where you are getting into those older guys because they do get pretty cheap, especially around this time of year when people get rookie fever. So, those are some guys that on my teams that I have been contending in, and, I'm planning to keep contending in, that I'm getting interested in.
Adam, real quick to that, do you have any value of kind of throwing it in the middle where you said, you're kind of on the cusp of it, you're trying to get in a big time victory? Do you go for some upside players who maybe are a little bit younger, like a Marquise Brown, for example, a guy who can maybe be a steal for you, but also, be somebody who can be productive right away, but maybe also long term?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, that's kind of like when you're coming out of the rebuild and you're not quite sure. Kind of what Chase was doing. However, it's still always good to, hey, if I can buy some extra years onto my contention, absolutely. So someone like Hollywood Brown, who I think we all on this show agree is due for some improvement over last year. Absolutely, I think that's a good one as well. On to you, though, Dan. Look, there's a variety of situations we might find ourselves in, contending, kind of coming out of that rebuild into contending. There's the straight-up rebuilds. Now, there's some guys where it's like, look, I don't care what the situation is. Either I want in or I'm out. Like, it doesn't really matter what my situation is. I'm buying this guy or I'm selling this guy. Like, my team could be falling apart. I could have just won 3 back-to-back-to-back. It doesn't matter. Like, I'm buying this guy or I'm selling this guy. So, for you right now, who are those guys where it's like, situation be damned. Get them on my team, get them off my team.
Abandon ship!
Yeah, it's time to get out on some guys before it's too late. And the guy who comes to mind first in that scenario is Nico Collins. I get it. His numbers across the board last year, wide receiver 6, looked like he was an elite guy. CJ Stroud made Nico Collins. There's nothing special about Nico Collins, okay? He's 6'4". That's probably the most special thing about him. You're talking about a guy who ran an average 4.5 40. You're talking about a guy who is an average to below average separator. You're talking about a guy who was 91st last year in route win rate. It was CJ Stroud all the way. And Nico Collins coming up on the point in his contract, his rookie deal, well, the team's going to have to make a decision soon if they're going to extend him. And I think the answer to that is no. Look, Stephon Diggs is there temporarily, for sure. But the idea they went out aggressively to get another wide receiver, I don't think they're super sold that Nico Collins is this player year in and year out. And we can talk all we want to, especially in redrafts. We'll get into it. Who's going to be the number 1 receiver of the Houston Texans this year? It's a 3-way tie. The truth is they're going to eat all into each other. But the guy I trust the most is the receiver who's actually best friends with the quarterback, and that's Tank Dell. I mean, it's been very prevalent since day one who CJ Stroud prefers amongst everybody in that room. It is Tank Dell. Which, by the way, in redraft leagues, best ball leagues, he's got the lowest ADP of the 3 receivers. It's the only one I'm taking. Just to throw that in there, by the way. So Nico Collins is somebody I want out on. while I still can, because there's a lot of scenarios in which this can go down. One, he's the most affected by Stephon Diggs, unless you think Stephon Diggs last season just totally fell off a cliff in the second half, and it wasn't because of the scheme change when they switched things over to Joe Brady, even though that's directly what it's correlated with. He's going to eat the most into Nico Collins' perimeter routes down the field, in the zone. He's going to eat the most into that. So already we're looking at a downtick, I think, in Nico Collins, who already had to have Brand Ayuk level efficiency, because we're talking about a guy who only had 109 targets last season. He wasn't getting the ball all that much to begin with. So there's a lot of concern there. If he does move on and go to another team, who knows where he goes? Could just turn to a guy who gets paid big time and then wind up finding out, oh, guess what? It was the quarterback who made you. So Nico Collins, somebody I'm not taking a chance on, because there's nothing special about him to keep him in that upper echelon top tier that he's valued at currently moving forward. That's the number one guy. The other guy, I had to do it because I wanted to get another buy for you, Adam, but I had two sells, and I couldn't decide between the two. I wanted to talk about both of them.
Sell. Abandon ship.
Get out of Rachaad White while you still can, while the light is still on. Legitimately good pass catcher, which might keep him fantasy relevant for a couple of years, regardless of what the situation comes up. And this year's the perfect year to sell him, because there's still nobody on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers depth chart. I think Chase Edmonds is still the depth chart or some ridiculousness. There's still nobody there to take away from the volume. So you're going to be able to sell it to somebody that this guy is getting tons of volume still has every chance to be everything he was, which was an RB1 last season. But volume was all he had. 3.6 yards per carry. I mean, it took him, it was 47th in breakaway run rate. 47th. There's 32 starting running backs. Okay, at best 64 in a platoon. This guy was getting all the volumes, 47th in a breakaway run rate. He had a broken tackle per 30 attempts. It's pathetic. So when it looks at Rachaad White as an actual runner, do you make guys miss? No. Do you make big plays? No. Are you efficient? No. Good pass catcher. That's it. That's all he brings to the table. So it stands to reason to me, and he's not particularly a very big guy either. If he's going to get this level of volume again, you're risking injury for a running back at that size in particular. You're risking a guy that after this year gets put into a platoon situation where you're just hoping he's a flex consideration because of his pass catching prowess. So now's the time to get out on him while you still can. I think all of us here, we've talked about it all off season long. We expect a regression for this offense with Dave Canales no longer there. Like, Baker Mayfield's not a superstar anymore. I'm sorry. Like, Dave Canales got the most out of him. It's the only reason why I don't totally blow up Chase's spot about the whole buying on Bryce Young thing, because they do have David Canales over there now. So, like, that's a big factor that's going into this. Mike Evans is a year older. Chris Godwin's a little bit slower. I don't think that offense is going to be as good as it was last season. So now's the time to get out on Rachaad White before it's too late. So those are my two guys. I had to bring them both up. I'm a hater. All this negativity.
just keep warning the people, Dan. You gotta keep them on their toes sometimes.
Right. Be warned. Don't do it. Get out of it.
Real quick, and then we can go ahead and wrap up. But I gotta ask you, if for a guy like Rachaad White, and we'll use him as the example, but are you selling him right now in the offseason, or are you going to let him get a couple games and maybe risk that injury, kind of like you were talking about? But, potentially.
That all falls into a kind of value getting. Right now, Rachaad White's value, I think, is as good now as it would be if he has a couple more good games to start off September. People love Rachaad White. He's younger. He had the big season last year. He has no competition again this season. A lot of other people haven't caught up with the idea that Tampa Bay's offense is likely to regress. So I think his value is just as good now as it would be if he had two good games to start off the season, heading into September. Does anybody know off the top of their head who they open with? I forgot now. I knew it earlier and I completely forgot. I'm drawing a blank on it now. But so I would get out on it before they play a tough team. He was
a pleasant surprise last year in the fantasy community, and you can still take advantage of that and catch somebody like Dan's been talking about. Catch somebody high on that, because he was legitimately one of a nice story last year in the fantasy world.
And sometimes those nice stories come to an end. And this show must come to an end. So, Dan, you want to take us out of here?
Yeah, absolutely. So next week, same time, 9:30 Wednesday night, we'll be going live and kicking off the team profile series division by division. I know that doesn't sound great in order. Everybody does division by division stuff, but it's going to be a lot of jam-packed, awesome content. We're going to make it a ton of fun for you guys. And it's really the best way to break down all these players as we get in transition into redraft season and really breaking down what we're going to be looking at from a team perspective all the way down to the players. And by the way, check out Fantasy Football Advice Network, because I've been publishing articles left and right over the past couple of weeks that I'm kind of getting into what we're going to be talking about during this series. So it's 9:30 next Wednesday night. We'll have a guest on. My goal is to have a guest on for each and every one of those episodes like we were doing earlier in the off season. So we're excited for that. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, Fantasy Football Advice Network, at FF Advice Network, everywhere on social media. Make sure you download us on your favorite podcast app, because we're available to you wherever you like to go to listen to us and download us on the go. Give all these guys a follow on social media. And guys, we'll see you again next week. Hey there, I'm proud to say that Underdog Fantasy is the newest sponsor of our show, and it's my favorite place to play fantasy games. No waivers, no trades, no lineup settings, just best ball for season-long drafters all year long. And you gotta check out Pick'em. It's so easy to play. Just pick 2 to 5 stats of your favorite players. You can choose whether they go higher or lower on those stats, and if you can pick 5 in a row, you can win 20 times your money. Sound like fun? Well, guess what? You can sign up with promo code FF Advice today to claim your special pick, plus a first-time deposit offer up to $250 in bonus cash. I cannot wait to see your entries.